Thank you, caller. You're on the air with Al Bielek. Where are you calling from, please?
I'm in the Bay Area in California.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick question based on, the knowledge that you now have. Is the stories that we have in the Bible, are they essentially true or not true, or is it just stories?
All right, the Bible, real or just a good story, Mr. Bielek?
Well, I think historically, is the listener referring to the book of Revelations or to the Older Testament?
Well, why don't you deal with both?
Right. In terms of the Old Testament, I think you'll find that historically much of that information is correct. The problem is how far back you take it, because you are missing many of the books in the Old Testament, the books of the Apocrypha and others which are available separately, which show an additional, much older history than is otherwise recognized. Adam and Eve are, in my sense, allegorical. They were not necessarily real as being the originators of the human race on this planet. But in terms of the book of Revelations, I would say that much of the information in there might yet prove to be correct, because whoever wrote it in terms of the patron saints of those days had an insight and apparently had the ability to see into the future, and they saw things in terms of warfare which have come to pass. And the terrible plagues which are now coming upon us in many respects, they also saw.
All right, line one, you're on the air with Al Bielek in Phoenix.
Well, there you go, folks. I mean, that is Al Bielek with Art Bell on Coast to Coast on June 20th, 1993. Now, this is a trained electrical engineer, a man of great intelligence, and as I've listened to almost all his talks, starting from about 1990, going up all the way into the 2000s, Al very rarely, if not, I don't think ever, talked about anything concerning biblical prophecy, anything in the Bible other than this time right here on Coast to Coast. Now, I know the recording's actually, it's a little muffled, but I am sure that we all heard Al feels that we should consult the books of the Apocrypha. And yes, they do exist. He planted the idea right there, though, that those particular books, the subject matter inside, would point to a different world history going further back. Obviously, he stated Adam and Eve are allegorical. You hear Jordan Maxwell. He's essentially, of course, look, these people can always change their mind when they're called out. But you listen to Jordan, he clearly, most of the Bible is allegorical to him also. But what really struck me with Al's answer here to the caller, that again stumped him. He says, whoever wrote the book of Revelations had an insight, meaning a prophetic insight, meaning an insight to what would occur in the future. Folks, this, if you follow along here with any of my videos, all right, we're going to get to this point, and it's going to be the crossroads, whether you people that are following these frauds on YouTube are either going to make the right turn, which will guide you to salvation, or you just keep listening to more of this claptrap, this malarkey, the No Malarkey Tour, right? So there you go. Uncle Al, whoever wrote the book of Revelations had an insight to the future. Well, this is the man that claims, he traveled into the future. And he said at some time after 2025, there was a shift. Some type of catastrophic event took place on Earth. And one would think that it may have something to do with end-time prophecy. that we find in the Bible. So interestingly enough, I have here also an article by the great Lyndon LaRoche on January 1st, 1989. Here, for years, Lyndon and his team had been, raising the alarm about Uncle Carl and all his buddies, George Bush and Henry and, Dick Cheney, the whole group of well-intentioned, individuals. And yes, folks, Ronald and Nancy Reagan, which he pointed out in this article that they're involved in astrological mysticism. Hey, how funny is that? Reagan goes over to Iceland, right, for the big arms, talk. He's got his big Star Wars thing going. And what was it, Gorbachev? The guy with the smashed tomato on his head. So they're there. These poor people in Russia hadn't had a drink of vodka in years, and here they are at this big arms talk in Reykjavik, Iceland. I think 1986. And Gorbachev busts out like 100-year-old bottle of vodka. And bear in mind, these poor people in Russia, starving, all right, under the wrath of communism, haven't seen a drop of vodka, all right? More or less probably a potato to try to make some. And here they are at this conference, swilling vodka. Folks, look, Lyndon LaRoche pointed all this out. But here, he mentions about what was taking place in 1988 over in Europe. That these kids were getting roped into this Satanism. And look whose name keeps popping up, Aleister Crowley. And he would have been, long gone by then, right? But here's the point, folks. Here's the point. All right, look at this Order Templi Orientis. All right, it's a secretive organization created by the late Aleister Crowley, who is the probable command center of Satanism. And look who it's centered around a certain Lieutenant Michael Aquino. Yeah, let me tell you something. If you were up in the Bay Area in the early 70s, all right, you may have fell prey to this guy, Aquino, all right? And I know, a lot of you might not want to admit that you were victims of satanic ritual abuse. Maybe you think your mommies and daddies still love you, but they sold you out. Don't worry, we're gonna straighten this all out, folks. So look, Lyndon told us all way back then in the 80s about what was going on. And certainly, we know that we are in this phase of end-time prophecy, as so aptly stated in Joel chapter 2, verse 28, and Acts chapter 2, verse 17, of what will occur as far as young men dreaming dreams, old men visions of the like. And we could definitely tell ourselves that this has been occurring. Clearly, there's these watchmen and watchwomen on YouTube that have been, for the last 3 years, diligently paying attention. And some of them actually, they claim to have the Word of God given to them. Well, look, we just heard old Al, and remember about the EMI story with Aleister Crowley and the man of the future from Preston. We'll get back to all that. So Al says, look into the books of the Apocryphy. Okay. Well, why don't we do this? Let's see. Why don't we see what Mr. Swerdlow has to say about all this?
Is actually a war, almost, if you will, between the 100% reptilians inside the Earth and the hybrid Illuminati on the surface of the Earth. Because the ones inside are waiting for the purebreds to come back and have an agenda to create a new empire with the Earth as its capital and to replace the Draco Empire. So this is a problem. So the reptilians inside the Earth have created a situation now which is threatening the Illuminati from outside, which is a whole nother story.
We will come to that later, I hope. I mean, there's a lot of things we will come to. But we have to understand, that's a question for me, what are we humans? So we are not originally humans on this planet, but where do humans come from? And I mean, the God in the Bible is, for me, is not God, but an alien who created us in a way or manipulated us.
Yes, you just have to read well. I suggest people read the Apocrypha because that contains the books that were excluded from the Bible by the church because it gave too much information. For example, and the Apocrypha is the Book of Enoch, Book of Joshua, Book of Jubilee. I think people should read that. And this point blank states in there about these beings genetically altering life on the earth and creating all kinds of different.
Wow, books of Apocrypha. I wonder where he got that from. Any guesses? Well, look, folks, what do you want me to tell you all? Now, I've read the Book of Enoch. It has nothing to do with the books of the Apocrypha. He mentioned the Book of Jasher. He mentioned the Book of Jubilees, which all these are very important. But they have nothing to do with the books of the Apocrypha. Let me ask you something. If there's time travel, these people, and remember Stuart, all right, along with the Spasagio guy, remember, they have seen Jesus, okay? And again, let's ask the question. It has nothing to do with racism, all right? Nothing to do with skin color. Is Jesus black or white? Just to settle the issue of time travel, folks. Forget about skin color doesn't matter, all right? We're living in a world where we should all have blinders on as it relates to skin color and who we are. It's what's inside. We know that. All right, so, time travel. What would be one of the most important things for these sad sack Satanists to figure out when their ticket's being punched, when their day is over, all right? All good things and all good time, folks, They want to know when the tribulation's going to hit, when they're being thrown into the lake of fire. That great day that we're all waiting for. Well, it's certainly the number one question would be when this occurs. No other reason that you should be tinkering around with time travel other to know when your demise is taking place, reptoids. Now, let's talk about time travel in the sense of a biblical perspective. And we're going to take this 170-year-old Bible right here, and we're going to look at chapter 45, which we're in Isaiah, chapter 45, and it says, God calleth Cyrus for his church's sake. By his omnipotency, he challenges obedience. So here we are. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus. Now, you got to remember, folks, we're in the year around 712 BC. Nearly 200 years before Cyrus. Now, you can't argue with this text right here, folks, because Isaiah was the one that wrote it well before Cyrus. How would he know who Cyrus is? Right there, folks, there's one good question that you can, when you go to bed tonight, to figure that one out as it relates to time travel. Now, The book of Revelations. Whoever wrote the book of Revelations, Al says. And look, I know Al's not here. He's no longer here to defend himself. And, you know, again, folks, I'm just the dumb trauma-based mind control victim that's still hanging around. Big pain in the butt for everybody, I know. But it's coming down to we're going to figure this time travel business out as far as it relates to the Montauk Project, the Philadelphia experiment, and all that. And again, I'm going to let you all know, my old man, he knows the who, the what, the why, and the where. And everybody, you know, again, this is coming down to an A-B choice. So, you know, I am going to, you know, try to see this thing out to the end, folks. But as far as this YouTube business, it's getting old, you know, concerning this targeting. I'm shocked that you people can't pick out the phonies. Well, anyway, here you go. Another positive Paul. PSA, folks. Keep your eyes to the sky and may God find his way into your heart.